Score, the podcast, the only show taking you inside the studios of the world's most celebrated composers and musical storytellers. Presented by Vienna Symphonic Library. Here are your hosts, Kenny Holmes and Matt Schrader.
What's up, everyone? I'm Kenny Holmes.
I'm Matt Schrader.
We are back, season 6, another episode, and this is an exciting one. Our guest this week won the Oscar for Best Original Score in 2023 for All Quiet on the Western Front. He's got a huge movie right now that's getting major Oscar buzz.
Big contender.
In Conclave and the new HBO Max series, Dune Prophecy. We're talking about Volker Bertelmann. You may also know him as Hauschka in his solo artist career.
Recording artist career, yep.
Super fascinating guy, super funny, but also very inventive. I get a little Jerry Goldsmith vibes from him.
There's a lot of experimentation. His approach. This is what was so interesting to me is this isn't just the same conversation that you have with a lot of composers that kind of have a workflow for things. He's really broken a lot of the way that you approach music with that. And that comes from his recording career, but also this whole idea of prepared piano, which is, you know, taking a standard piano and rigging it up with a lot of weird little, literally bells and whistles on the strings, on different things to make it sound nothing at all like a piano, and then still playing it and finding a musicality and all of the sounds and the textures and all that stuff. And he did a lot of that on All Quiet. He did some of that on Conclave and so much of that in his recording career. Yeah,
I mean, he's putting ping pong balls in the piano, just taking the lid off and dismantling it. And here's what's cool. Volker is from Europe, so it was in Los Angeles for this interview, and our great friends at Soundbite Studios in downtown LA let us use their space to record this interview, and they had a baby grand piano in the studio. So Volker walked us through prepared piano, and we have a bonus clip that we're going to put on our YouTube channel at Score the Podcast, so check that out. He explains how he does it. It's really cool. I mean, he explained it with a hotel room key in his iPhone. So you literally use anything.
To Nate Gold for letting us risk his piano on rigging up. So, I mean, we didn't go too crazy with it.
No. I asked him, I said, do you mind if Volker plays your piano? And he said, I'd be honored if Volker played. I didn't tell him he was going to do prepared piano.
Yeah.
But I don't think it does damage to the piano.
Yeah.
As long as you're using lighter instruments.
Or we'll get a very expensive bill. But yeah,
we'll find out. But thankfully, we have a new sponsor that might be able to help us cover that. We're so happy for this season to be joined by Vienna Symphonic Library, our presenting partners of Score the Podcast Season 6. These guys are taking the industry by storm. So many of your favorite shows and movies are recorded at the Synchron stage in Vienna, and they have the Vienna Symphonic Library software packages where you can bring the Synchron stage basically into your home studio. So all of the instruments are recorded by their orchestra. These are real instruments. They sound amazing. They sound real. And when you put them mock-up stuff on your home digital audio workstation,
sounds amazing.
You're going to blow people's minds.
We've been playing with it a little bit, and it's just
really cool.
It's amazing how much you can do with just simple tools. They've really thought out how intuitive a lot of this stuff is. And I mean, this is expertly recorded stuff. These guys are... Vienna is the city of music, and there's a rich tradition of all of that there, but all of the engineers behind this, the way that things are recorded, the samples that they've done, this Synchron series gives you all of the instruments. It gives you pianos, it gives you choir, all of these different elements that you can have to really refine your craft and customize things. They have a string series, Duality Strings, that is incredible. They've recorded it simultaneously on their big stage where all of these big productions are recording music for TV shows and film, and also on the small stage, so you get a dry sound. And so this tool that they've built lets you mix between the two and really dial in all the acoustics of this in the coolest way that I've never seen before.
Yeah, it's basically like having access to both stages. And don't take our word for it. Volker Bertelmann, like I said, he recorded Dune Prophecy at the Synchron stage. So these are the same locations, the same players that you can bring home. It's the real deal. And excitingly, all of these things are available on their website at vienna.co.at.
VSL.co.at.
VSL stands for Vienna Symphonic Library, Matt. I was just like making sure you knew that.
Yeah.
But if you go on the website, there's sample players, there's demos, there's videos you can watch to check them out. And at the end of the show, we're going to play you a demo cue, a mock-up of James Newton Howard's Fantastic Beasts. And
sounds great.
It's
sounds
incredible.
Amazing.
It sounds like you're listening to the score. I mean, and these are things that you can mock up at home. And you don't have to be some incredible Volker Bertelmann to put this stuff together.
And by the way, you don't need a ton of money to get some of these packages too. Some of these are really affordable. You always think like, oh, this must be thousands and thousands of dollars.
If my favorite composer uses it, that's probably out of my price range. Yeah.
Not the case. Check it. These vary. The prices vary, of course, but there's specials all the time. You got to check it out because some of these are something, man. I mean, under a couple $100, you can get an incredible suite of stuff you'll be able to create with for years and years and years. So amazing deals on some of this.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to it. We're going to head to downtown LA to Soundbite Studios. Our guest, Volker Bertelmann, he's from Europe. So we're lucky to have him in town in person. Let's get to the interview. All right. We are so thrilled to have the amazing Volker Bertelmann. We're here inside Soundbite Studios because you don't live here in Los Angeles. So tell us about coming into LA. I'm sure you're having a lot of meetings. You're doing some press tours. How's everything going?
A lot of interviews.
Yeah, I mean, you have to get used to the driving a little bit when you are coming out of a town where you do mainly everything by foot. But I mean, every time I'm coming over, I love it. Once I land and I'm driving into town, I always have a lot of experiences, memories of the city that they all come back once I'm arriving. And in the beginning, when I came to Los Angeles, I was driving always myself. I had a rental car and I did all the cruises by myself. And that was now that I'm having somebody picking me up, I really enjoy just to watch everything,
just
and
looking around,
and it takes a lot of stress of myself. So I'm always loving to be here.
And where do you live now?
I live in Düsseldorf. A lot of people think that I'm obviously, when I'm coming from Germany, that I'm from Berlin, but I stayed in Düsseldorf now 25 years, and it's a very interesting town for electronic music and experimental music, as well as for art. It's maybe one of the most interesting city where you find a lot of well-known artists, and I love actually the connection to painters and sculptures, and I love actually the connection with music and their work.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely inspiring, I'm sure. And, one of the things that we find interesting about your composer career is you also have a solo artist career, and it's now sort of gone in two different directions. You're Volker Bertelmann for film composing, but then you're Hauschka doing your solo stuff. But let's kind of go back to where it all started with you for music. What is your musical background? Was it an influence from your parents? What got you into music?
Well, I was raised in a very strong Christian household. I would say, strong Protestant, maybe a little bit like a Mormon. Kind of, very separate. Women and men were separated in the church.
Wow.
Very strong believers in a way, but at the same time, obviously a lot of conflicts in when you want to be in a rock band. So we had quite I was dealing sometimes in my youth with guys that were born in 1895, and they were raised at a time where there was no car, and then suddenly they have a young fella sitting next to them with a Moog synthesizer, and you have obviously a little bit of a discussion going, And so in that surrounding, I learned a lot about Bach and chorals, a lot of orchestral music. So that was my background. And at some point, I was sitting in a service at the church and next to my mom, and there was a piano player playing a Chopin concert, and I said to her, "Can I have lessons with this guy, because I want to play exactly like him?" And so my mom said, "Yeah, but we don't have a piano." And then I said, "Yeah, but I want that very badly. So I nagged her a couple of times, and then my grand aunt had 2 pianos, and she just rented us one.
That's cool.
And so I could start. And that's
How old were you?
9.
Okay.
And I really, I remember that moment very, very clearly, because it was a little bit like how I'm doing music today. It was something where I felt suddenly when I heard that piece, I was so moved as a kid. I just was like, this is it. I want to do this.
It's so interesting because usually it's the parents pushing music on the kid, and they're like, I don't want to go to lessons. No. But you were the opposite.
Yeah, I was.
And you were inspired by what you were hearing instead of your parents being like, someday if you practice, you'll be good like this.
Yeah.
Do you remember what it was that really just made you obsess at that young age, not knowing anything really about how any music probably is made or written or anything?
Yeah, because I had the feeling that this piece of music that was performed there in a way included the whole life cycle. I was in a way feeling that this was actually expressing not only the fun, it was like the journey, that this also limitation of time that you're on Earth. In a way, that was something that, when you are always, growing up with religion, this is always that's the question of belief in a way, And when I heard this music, I was like, I really, I want to do something that expresses, all that in just sitting at the piano and play that. So.
That's so cool. And then, so I read that around the age of 14, you formed a band.
Yeah.
You talked about growing up, and it was a very Christian sort of
upbringing. What did your family think about your rock band?
When you went to
give us the details.
The direction that you went in music wasn't playing Bach.
No, I mean, when I was, I would say before you go, you are an official member of the church. You obviously go to this kind of course and we had where you actually get prepared to be a part of the church. So we had a very progressive priest, and he gave us like a book with all the world religion. And so I was reading that, and at that point when I was reading it, I was like, well, if I was born in India and I wouldn't be raised Christian, would I be then somebody who goes into hell?
Yeah,
that was my question.
Yeah.
And so I said, no, I think actually everybody who is born is in a way worth, being hugged and, having the same fate in a way, finding a purpose and so on. And so when I played music in a band, obviously we had discussions about, you're always late, you go into late night, band meetings, you are in pubs, all the girls are hanging out in your rehearsal room. So there was a lot of
these sinful things.
Yeah, there was a lot of sinful things. But at the same time, I didn't thought that this is a sinful thing. It was actually the only thing you could do in the countryside. That was fun, and where it was a life where you could, create something, get out of the bubble, out of the routine. And so my parents were, in the beginning, they were not very happy. At the same time, I was very good in sports, so I was in a handball team, like two classes under the Premier League in a way. So I was training four times a week, and I was really. I had the choice in a way if I want to be a sportsman or a musician, and I decided to go with music at some point. But the band was in a way something where I felt very inspired by, and where I could go in the evening. So I was not spending time with wasteless or with time that was not useful. I really created with my friends. We were creating things. We went to concerts. And then obviously when the school was over, then my parents hit me again with, saying a musician is not a proper job. And because everybody in my family was economics or you know people.
And your backup plan was sports, which is the other one that parents are like, okay, these are fun, but what are you going to do for a career?
Yeah. So and I was very good in mathematics. So I was programming computers. I was very inspired by. I was a searcher, which I'm still am. I'm searching for, things that are interesting. I want to go deeper into the topic. So when I was then, finished with school, I went to a hospital and I worked as a civil servant for 2 years in a cancer part of the hospital. And I think that was maybe the part of my life where things have changed a lot, because I realized that it's very necessary you think about the purpose of your life, because I saw a lot of people at the end of their life, and so I was getting a lot of positive energy in terms of working on something that is sensible. So when I finished that, I studied medicine. I went to the university. I pleased my parents for a moment.
Was this with some reservation, some hesitation, or did you think that was the way that your life was going to go at that point?
It was at that point my feeling I want to help people, but then I slowly realized that there's also an economic side of the medicine part, and I was like, man, this is not only a social service that you're doing, it's also like you have to figure out what part of the medicine, what kind of doctor you want to be. And then it was getting complicated for me. And I said, no, I think I want to go back to the music.
And you did.
Yeah.
I want to play you a little something that we found on the internet. Mm-hmm. Let me just turn this towards you here.
Oh, yeah.
So this is God's Favorite Dog.
Yeah.
This is your hip hop group from the 90s? When did this start? And tell us a little bit about it.
Well, that was at a time where, when I look at it, it was like, it's ridiculous.
There you are in the keys.
Yeah, I'm in the key, but we all had like no sense of, we felt like we have to use, she is also fantastic. So we had a great, we tried to figure out what kind of music we wanted to do, and mainly my cousin, who was wearing the yellow jacket. He's my cousin. I met him by accident on the streets in Düsseldorf, and he was studying in Richmond, Virginia, and he was just on a visit. And then we both we liked each other already when we were small kids, and so we decided to start a band and write songs. And then we did one gig and we got signed by Sony Music.
Wow!
And that was and then a couple of weeks later we were standing on these big stages opening up for the biggest German hip hop band, and suddenly I was in front of thousands of people, and there I figured out that I'm not a rock star, that this is not my life. I felt like it's a little bit too stressful, the whole thing, and I needed to find something that was my music.
What do you think it was that led to that surprise signing onto a label?
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, well, we were stage diving to that music, it was like
Hot Dog Season?
Yeah,
is the name of the album?
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Well, it was about, my cousin was writing all the lyrics, and we wanted to find, a mixture. Well, we were big fans of Stereo MCs, which was a band from England that was, in a kind of way they were rapping, but not also singing.
Yeah.
And we were big fans of Pearl Jam and, and Red Hot Chili Peppers and all that. There was like a big part of
it's
our...
like Linkin Park before Linkin Park.
Yeah.
Kind of vibe.
Yeah. And also what I liked about the way that was performed, it was so physical, that I never experienced before that. And I wrote all the music and produced the music. So in a way, I was always dragging the band at some point. Oliver and me, we were in the beginning, we loved actually hanging out together and going to the studio, and
I love, it's kind of like when we discovered the Hans Zimmer clip of being in the Buggles, and you're like, wait a minute. There's an Oscar-winning composer, and he's jamming out back in the day on a keyboard like that.
Yeah, no, and that was at the time where I sometimes had all the keyboards on the first Mac, laptop, and that it was automated. So I just pressed play, and then I went to the front, and we both were like, like.
What do you think it was that led to that? Because did you mention it was after the first gig? That somebody said, hey, we want to sign you. Yeah. Which is not the usual experience at all.
No, but it was the energy that my cousin and me, we had together. We were really, how can I say it? We really were pure, I would say. And people really loved the pureness and, like the immediacy. And there were not so many bands at that time that did that in Germany. I mean, most of the career of that band was happening in Germany, but I learned a lot about let's say the mainstream, big record companies.
Yes, I'm sure that was a pretty big lesson that came after that.
Yes, and you learned that it's that's all about hits, and that you have to make the singer. In that video, for example, when we got signed, they said, I think we need another singer. And, because she's not looking as all of your other guys. And so suddenly I realized, it's also about the looks. Mm-hmm. And I realized that it's actually a lot of the decisions that I made about my music are not made because the music is in the focus. It was much more about all the other things. And that made me really... it made me aware of that. I want to find a way. I want to find music where I really can trust the people that tell me they love my music and they take it and they want to lift it up and they want to work with it. And that I couldn't find that in the major label industry. It was so driven by chart hits, and we were with Sway. I think we were on in the charts on 112 or something like that. But if we would have been on 99, suddenly all the investment, 100, suddenly all the investment would go into the band, and we were maybe longer together. But because we were on 112, let's say the career with that band slowly degraded, and we felt like when we did the second album, they were already trying to put the level so high that we can't reach the next album. So, and then we said at some point, okay, my cousin went into a Buddhist monastery for a long time after that. And I became a father, and I have started my family. And then I said to myself, I will stop music for now and just think about it, what actually music means for me and where I want to go.
Yeah. And so from that transition, you start a family, you take a pause from music. Did Hauschka follow that? Was that the next step in your musical evolution?
Yeah. That was, my thought was, in a way, I have to be, if I want to be a musician, I need to find something that, when I'm just pure, me, without being fancy, without a special haircut, without, let's say, special clothes, without jumping around, that if that is happening, that if the audience likes me when I'm just being myself, that's maybe the indicator that I should continue. If that is not happening, I would say it will be so much work, and the parameters will change let's say the haircuts are changing. I have to change my haircut. The clothes are changing.
Whatever the next thing is, the next thing.
Did you find that God's Favorite Dog wasn't your vibe? You were just like fitting into something that wasn't you?
Yeah. It was actually, in the end, it was all over the whole journey was fantastic, and I learned a lot. And I actually, it was actually therefore, and later, nearly every experience that I had afterwards, I saw after that experience, like, you can't fail in a way. You have to make decisions, and if they are not working to your favor, they work for your favor with the next decision that you make, because you understand you make the experience in a way that you see, okay, this is not my path, this is not my path, this might be my path.
Yeah.
And so God's Favorite Dog was a big beginning, because I ticked off let's say the pop star box
and
very
you probably
quickly.
the tools that you take from that, like you said, learning the business, learning the corporate entities, and everyone getting their hands on things was probably a good training ground for what was to come.
Yes, and I mean, I don't want to be understood wrongly. I don't see that as a negative part of the music business. It's just, for me, my personal experience was not fitting, or my person was not fitting in that surrounding. I felt like I need to find a purity, what I want to be. And specifically, I was a piano player. I learned piano, and piano was not happening in a band with rock riffs. And, there were even bands that had like T-shirts on, I hate keyboards. And, at that time, and which I understood from the energy of the music, because I love actually guitar music, and I'm a big fan of jumping around and being dancing to
that energy,
dancing to that energetic music. But to be a pianist, you have to find something for yourself that is maybe not the classical pianist, and I wasn't the virtuos that could be playing in classical music halls. So I had to find my own path. Well,
if you pit up God's Favorite Dog next to Hauschka music, you would never know that the same guy's behind it.
No, it's because by starting the Hauschka album, the very first one, Substantial, was in a way the first album where somebody encouraged me to say, listen, your music that you do on your piano has also an attachment to electronic music. And there's some trance elements in there. There's sometimes beat. This one that you're playing now is obviously more the intimate and the interior music that I love so much, because it, in a way, is music for my imagination. It's music for you being vulnerable in a world where you just go out of your house and you just, walk in by yourself through all the experiences that you have. Yeah. And you have to somehow keep your own soul in a way in shape. And I think the music can help with that.
That moniker, Hauschka, your name at that point was Volker.
Yeah.
You go by Volker again now for a lot of your film scoring. Where did Hauschka come from? What was the reason that you gravitated toward that as a moniker that you would release under?
Well, it had two reasons. One was I was still in a band mode, and I had the feeling I want to be a band, maybe just by myself. And I wanted to be maybe invisible as a person, because I had the feeling that if I release piano records under my name, I feel in a way forced to be the pianist. But if I'm Hauschka, it's a little bit, you appear somewhere and nobody knows, is it a woman or is it a man or is it like a 10-piece band? Or so I found that kind of anonymity quite...
it's like a mask, like a superhero.
Exactly. It is a little bit like that. And I loved that. That gave me a little bit more freedom to start my own thing. It took me away the pressure and the expectations, which then later, with the film music, I suddenly realized that in certain areas of music, a moniker like that is a little bit, not helpful, because nobody knows who you are and nobody knows how to talk to you. Like, should we say Hauschka or should we say Volker?
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of what you just said.
Yeah.
You want people to know who you are in the film music world. Yeah. And we see this. I mean, Tom Holkenborg, Junkie XL, there's a lot of artists who become film composers and then they realize, maybe the nickname, the moniker is not working for this space. And we were actually just talking about this morning, like what inspired that? Because on Lion, on the soundtrack, you're listed as Hauschka, but then you moved to All Quiet on the Western Front, and you're Volker Bertelmann.
Yeah, it was actually right after Lion, because when I did that was my first Oscar round, and I was nominated nearly for every prize. So me and Dustin O'Halloran, who's a very good friend of mine, we you know, we were obviously with this film, we experienced so much together, and we learned so much about, you know, traveling through LA. And we said, if we do this now, let's do it full in. We actually go to every party and to every interview and to everything, just to understand where you next time where you don't go. Yeah, that was the in a way the you know, the search of it. And at that moment, when we were in interviews, you know, people were with Dustin, they were all fine because it was Dustin O'Halloran. But with me, they were always like, yeah. And then there is, wait a second, what is your name again? You know? So I felt that was one thing. And the other thing was that when I release scores, I mean, I release in a year maybe 5 soundtrack albums, and if I'm releasing a Hauschka album, it gets buried completely. So from Lion, after Lion, I started to split my website, and I have one half of my website is Hauschka, and the other part is Volker Bertelmann, and somehow they are obviously related with each other. But I love actually to have a project where I can have the freedom, where nobody tells me what I have to do, where I just can go wild. And if I'm just finding a glass bowl and I just make an album with a coffee cup, or, you know, I'm happy to do that. And nobody gives me any, you know, like, you can't do this, which is actually a phrase that motivates me even more to do it.
I was telling Kenny this morning before we got here that there is a certain element of defiance, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a creative way that I hear in a lot of your music, and I think is part of your background as well, where there's the traditional element I think is very important, but you're always exploring. And I'm sure that you've encountered people that are saying, this is too crazy of an idea. This is not.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Maybe sometimes it is. Maybe you agree at some point that certain things are a little too out there or whatever. But I'm curious about your kind of approach and getting into something that feels like it's breaking the rules, but you kind of want to see where it leads and what that creative process is like.
Well, I would say coming back to the approach of having people reflect, having people confronting with me as a person on an instrument, to actually understand that they really love what you're doing. I felt like what I'm doing at home when I'm sitting at my piano and nobody listens, and I really love what I'm doing. If I imagine that an audience sits around me while I'm at home, and I'm just don't recognize that they are there, but I'm just doing my thing. And afterwards they say, hey man, thank you so much that we could be a part of that time. It felt to me, this is actually what I want. So by exploring things, you obviously, and also I wanted to be a part of the electronic nerd, you know, the scene where you're exploring sounds, where you maybe can just do one track just with pink noise, or you just do one track just with the bass drum, or you have a dance track where the bass drum comes in at 9 minutes, you know, where you just keep on holding, and then you know, the crowd is like, yes, you know, something like that. I love that so much that I said to myself, when I'm doing concerts as Hauschka, I will never prepare a set. I just prepare I have my electronics, and I'm starting to prepare the set when I'm doing the sound check. So whenever I'm doing the sound check, I'm just figuring out what sounds are sounding in the surrounding where I'm playing good. Let's say I'm playing in a church, I have so much reverb. When I'm playing in a club, I need a lot of bass, and I feel like, I can feel the
because
pumping.
It's always going to be different anyway.
Yes.
So you're playing like electronic jazz then? You're just totally freelancing on stage?
Yes. In a way, every concert is a record, you know, because I can't repeat it anymore. But the nice thing about it is when you press record and you go back home, some of the concerts, and one is an album called 141102, I think is the one. Maybe the date is not right, but it's one album that I recorded in Japan at a concert, and that's the whole show. There's no edits. It's just like
as it happened.
As it happened.
Wow. So if you go see Hauschka in concert, it's like an exclusive experience that won't be replicated.
No, never. And that's something that, I mean, I have, now for the last album, Philanthropy, I had some samples because I wanted to use synthesizers as well, but I didn't want it, I only wanted to travel with 23 kilograms. For the, so I needed to find a kind
of baggage fees.
Yes, the baggage
out of control these days.
No, but it's also a reduction of how can I make it work to travel light and having not like a huge truck, and that was always my feeling, just to be flexible. And so I found a system where I can actually work with those samples. But what I'm doing in a way, I'm remixing my own songs on stage and every evening differently. And the interesting thing is when I'm sitting later after the concert at the record table and I'm selling my merch myself, so I'm not going to the backstage entrance and get the car and go to a fancy hotel. I rather sit at a table, and my fans, in a way, that come to the concerts, or people that love my music, they are so not well behaved, but they are so great that I really can do that. I can just sit at the record table and answer questions, sign it, and give them the record. And I really love that kind of interaction with each other, and that uplifts me so much that I sometimes can't sleep. And I'm just like fulfilled with conversations,
pride,
and pride, and also a love from people that I received, from a concert, and that, I would say, that's one of the best things in life.
It's very gratifying, I would imagine, especially because I want to talk about All Quiet and Conclave both, which are phenomenal scores. But one of the big things that you are known for is the prepared piano work that you have done, which a lot of people, including many composers in our world, have no idea what that. They think that's something related to piano instruction or something like. But can you just explain what prepared piano means?
Yeah.
Because in short, it sounds like it's modifying a lot of things into something totally different.
Yeah, it's actually making the piano to an endless box of sounds, and immediate. You don't have to open a plugin. You don't have to have a filter.
So how do you do that?
Well, it's maybe to explain that, I go a little bit back, because before I started Hauschka, I did a couple of electronic records. I had a small band that was just existing for 2 albums. That was called Music AM, and that was music that we composed mainly on the morning. So we had, and because I felt music in the morning is different than music in the evening. You have a different approach to it. So when I did that record, and that was very textural, and there was a lot of very visceral sounds, I said to myself, when I'm performing as a pianist, I want to have all these sounds, but I don't want to have a computer. Because when I look at the screen, I always tie to a grid, to a click track. And I also fiddling on a screen, where if I'm just me on a piano, that can help. So I was researching, how can I actually get, without the click, how can I implement electronic sounds in the piano? And I started with putting, sorry. I starting with putting elements on the strings to create hi-hats on the string. So
elements.
Yeah, elements is I use, for example, for the hi-hat, I'm using light foil, the light filters, they can be blue or red. They sound the same. But if you put that under the strings, between the hammer and the strings, the hammer hits the plastic, but it also hits the note. So you have a note and you have the hi-hat. And if you do a microphone right at this plastic foil, and you filter out the tone, and you just have the hi-hat, it sounds like a 808 hi-hat, as well as you can put a drum on the strings, or I use a lot of mutes, like wooden sticks that you put on the strings. And because of the wood that is attached to the strings, and you play the note, the wood starts to resonate, and the reverb of the piano creates suddenly a kind of Asian kind of drum instrument. And the stick that you have, for example, the mutes you can actually push, let's say a centimeter in one direction, and every centimeter, every millimeter, the sound changes. And that's for me a very interesting thing that you actually have with each preparation. You have on each millimeter another sound, which means you have an endless variation.
So it's the physical version of what probably a lot of composers are familiar with, which is endless digital filters that they might put on a track in order to change the texture of the sounds and all of that. But this is doing that in physical form, really probably refining it. And then, I mean, do your pianos look crazy by the time you have dialed in the sound that you want?
They look not only crazy, they look like I'm sometimes it looks nearly like a whole world of sounds, or like an interior, nearly like a city, because I'm packing up things into the piano, and I'm having sometimes I'm even I did one show, for example, where the whole inside of the grand piano looked a little bit like a Asian shrine. But where you could like just move a camera to inside of the preparations, and it would look like a like a fun fair, or
some festive celebration.
So what that means is it also gives me a lot of spontaneous things to work with, and I have to react to failures. Even in the concerts, I sometimes feel like, I muted this string too much, so I can't use that tone anymore, and I have to switch the keys, which I normally use. As we all have habits at some point, we play the instrument in a certain way. You have certain riffs that you like, and then you play them, and the next song has at least one of those riffs in your writing. But if you are forced not to use the riffs anymore, you start, playing differently. And so that helped a lot. And maybe the most fun example is maybe the ping pong balls that I use in the piano, because when I'm sometimes filling up the grand piano with 5,000 ping pong balls.
Wow.
And then when you play that, the ping pong balls start to jump, and you see like a wave inside of the grand piano that actually shows where you are tonally.
You just see them bouncing.
You see them bouncing, flying. Some are shooting into the audience, some are shooting somewhere else. But when they drop, they create a random rhythm on top of what you are playing. So you have not only the piano playing, you also have these ping pong balls jumping around. And the further you go down with your piece, the piano empties up, because all the ping pong balls
bounced out.
But then you have to play where the ping pong balls are, because there are some only in the bass. So you change your playing towards the ping pong balls, and that's something that I really love. That expresses a little bit the idea that you are forced to react to something that is random, and I love that.
It's not even possible physically to play the same thing then, because you can't even control gravity and all of these things going on.
Yes, and you have to be, obviously you have to have courage to see that as a part of a concert.
Yeah.
Because there might be people,
improvisational side.
Yeah, there might be people that say, it's he just plays 3 notes, and then everything that it needs people that are used to, let's say, minimal music, as well as finding the pleasure in the event itself. And I think the Fluxus art was a little bit like that, where they did a lot of performances. Just playing, let's say, cello in ice water, or where you just felt like, hey, is that music? But there was also a kind of performance involved. One
other thing is, just because music is all frequencies, and that's how a piano functions to begin with, just those little reverberations rippling out and having other effects in other things means that you're still creating all of the thing. You mentioned random, but it's not random, because you're still pressing the keys. You're still causing them to bounce.
Yeah.
It's just wherever the placement is, that's where it goes, but it's still your artistry that leads to the next decision that you make as an artist. So that's such a cool concept.
Yeah, it is. It actually keeps you alive, and you have to be very awake at the concert because obviously things can happen, and then you have to make sure that you are. Let's say that you are also fine with mistakes. I think that is a big concept for developing new things. As we know, people that are inventing things, they have a lot of accidents in the beginning, and maybe people inventing the plane. Many people died just to have the plane. In that shape that we have it now. And with music, it's not gladly, and it's not about dying. It's more about, finding, your own way in a landscape where nearly everything is already done.
Yep.
Well, hearing all
keeping
this,
the experimentation alive. It may be dying inside sometimes if you embarrass yourself too much.
Man, sometimes it's but it's interesting that people forgive you, because they just feel like the benefit they get is so much higher than they listen to something that they always hear anyways.
You're progressing slowly. Sometimes it takes a little bit, but it's when you're describing all of this, I can't help but think of like Jerry Goldsmith and Planet of the Apes and bouncing rubber balls on bowls and stuff like that. You were kind of setting yourself up for film music, and I'm wondering when that transition happened for you. You mentioned Dustin O'Halloran. I don't know if that was kind of your foray into it together. When did the transition happen where someone said, hey, you might be great for scoring a film or a television show?
That was 2012, where, I did a TV series in Germany when I was 18, with that first band. That was my first experience with film, but I had never contact to the film world where I could, let's say, family or, people that just drag you in and say, hey, can you do the music for my film? So then I forgot about that. And in 2012, there was a kind of quite, successful director in Germany. She came to my concert and she said, would you be interested in, because I really love what you're doing, would you be interested in making the score for my film? So I did that, and that was
What was your reaction though when she said that? Were you like, me, or did you say, I can do that?
No, I said yes, I can do that. But I said at the same time, I don't know if it will be like you imagine, because prepared piano is not always the best for film music because it's so immediate. You might want to have in certain areas different instrumentation. If I can do that, I would love to work on it, and so I did that film, and then I did like 2 more after that, and then Dustin's and my film was also the director of Lion was coming to my concert in Melbourne, in Australia, and he just I got a call when I was driving to my concert, and somebody said, "There's a director who wants to see you." And at that time I felt like mostly student filmmakers are coming to my.
This is Edward Berger?
No, this was Garth Davis.
Garth Davis, okay.
Yeah. And so I said to my publisher, I said, listen, I have to sell records. Maybe you can wait in the merch line. So at some point, I saw these 2 fellas standing in front of me at the merch table, and they said, hey, we are... I'm Garth, and very nice, and they were so.
That's when you knew they were serious.
You're like, sir, you got to buy something.
Yes,
if you want to talk to me.
No, I said there's another like 10 meters line behind you. I first have to finish them, and then I can, we can see each other. There's a pub over there. Why don't we meet there? So I met them in the pub, and then he showed me just a picture of the landscape in India, and I said, maybe that's not a student film. It looks so impressive, and then he was talking to me a little bit about the film, and I said I'm totally happy and to do it. But then he said, "But do you want to have the film? Are you okay with sharing the composition with someone else?" And I said, that's difficult, because it's already difficult for one person, but then I have to work with a new composer, and we have to figure something out. I said, I don't know, it depends really who it is. And then he said, no, I'm thinking about Dustin O'Halloran. And I said, oh, that's a different thing, because we were on the same label, we had the same agent. He was at my marriage as a guest. We were friends already for a long time.
You knew what he was about.
Yeah, and I knew that he was very, one of the most unselfish persons that I know, and that is a very big, let's say, a very big point when you work together. You have to cut loose with your ego. That's if you are in a collaboration and you want to have it succeed, you want to have all the best of everyone. And if you're starting to bully, around and push people on the side, that doesn't work. So when I knew that he was on board, I said, Dustin, every time, and then he got called, and then we suddenly were on a journey. And from there onwards, I think since then I've done 40 films.
You've been very busy.
I was very busy, and I really loved digging into it, because I wanted to learn the craft and what it needs and the organization of cues. And, it's the whole area of administration for working on a big film or on a series. You need to organize that very tight so that you are concentrating on your art and everything else is taken care of. So you need to set that up,
And you got an Oscar nomination for that
score.
score.
Which was also, after the fourth film, you're just like, what? You're obviously surprised, but also you learn, and I'm very happy that was happening when I was already way over 40. The good thing was that I was quite calm in comparison to when I was maybe around middle of my 20s. I would have gone crazy, and this was, at least I could take in everything. And I learned also a lot of things for All Quiet. When I did that one, then I knew that I have to dress up warm when we go into the celebrations, because I was freezing. It was freezing cold in the room where the Oscar celebration is. In the theater. So you need to eat a lot. So I learned that.
It's a long night.
It's like a wedding.
But you don't know when you do it the first time. You think like, I just come there, people will give me food, and there will be a lot of drinks, and then you can go out whenever you like. That wasn't happening, and so I was sitting there with a low blood pressure, freezing, and waiting for the moment that somebody says you're winning, and then we didn't win, and that night, and I was looking backwards, I was so happy that I was actually had the chance of practicing all that, and not going on stage with a freezing feeling and maybe nearly collapsing on stage,
literally shivering on the stage.
Can I ask, just because you're talking about the Oscars experience for All Quiet, everyone always says I had no idea that they would call my name, and you never know for sure.
I had nothing prepared,
but you must have known that there was a decent chance, and the film was a sensation, as we know, and it was very unique sound, and you accomplished something really incredible with that. So what was that moment like when they called your name?
And the Oscar goes to All Quiet on the Western Front, Volker Bertelmann.
It's a little bit like you are switched to a moment where you will not forget it, but somehow you forget it, because you are not present. It's a little bit like an unreal moment of walking up, and then there's the speech, and I knew from my first experience that I have to prepare a speech without a paper. So when I was 2 months before the Oscars, I was practicing nearly when I woke up at night, I just said, I started the speech. And then I looked at my watch, and I'm like, oh, it's 2 minutes. I have to actually shorten the sentences. I have to make sure that I'm not saying thank you to this, thank you to, I have to say thank you, and then the names, all in a row, so I can make things shorter. So I was practicing that, and I would say when I was there, and that's a little bit like Edward Berger is also mentioning about his films. It needs, in a way, a very precise and good planning. to cut loose and improvise. You need to know what you're doing beforehand, and then you can, you're feeling much better to lose the track, but you always have a plan where you can come back to, and okay, this is what I said. So when I went on stage and I had this speech in my mind that I could automatically say, I changed the words, but they came across in a way, and for me it was just a relief because there was no stumbling, I actually exactly knew that I wanted to thank my family first, because they are the ones that, they are...
Who had to hear you practice the speech.
Yeah, not only this, they also carry a lot of the weight when I'm absent. For example, when I'm now on the road, my wife is taking care of my son and of our son, and she is taking care of all the things. And when I'm back, I'm obviously then she is on the road. But this needs a lot of organization and a lot of support, and you have to understand that this is not my own decision. It's always a decision of everyone in the family that you're doing this. And so these are they were the first ones. And if you don't know your speech, it might be possible that you forget them.
Yep.
Yeah, and that happens.
Yeah.
You mentioned who you were thanking, and you gave a shout out to your mom and said you thought of her a lot while you were writing the score for All Quiet on the Western Front, and we do want to talk about it. So what was it about your mom? What were you thinking about when writing that score? And let's talk about a little bit of how you created it and how you came up with the sound of All Quiet on the Western Front.
Well, I was invited by Edward to come to to the cinema in Berlin and watch the first quite progressed cut. So the film was already in a very good shape, and I watched it, and I was deeply moved, because in a way what we talked now the whole conversation about was reflected in that film, because it was about young people, thinking that they just go on an excursion that they have fun together, and then they find themselves just suddenly in that kind of situation where they can't escape and everybody dies, and that's expresses obviously a little bit how fragile each life is, and where you are born, you can have circumstances that are not hopeful, and in some areas you are the most hopeful person in the world. So these kind of things are not always in our hands. And so when I went back, I was thinking about the time of 1918, and I said to myself, who did I know who was living at that time? And it was obviously not my mom, but my grandparents were born around 1900, 1902. So my grandfather was actually in the First World War, and as a very young boy. And so I was thinking about them, and then I felt like I was thinking about these old homes where they were whenever I was a kid, and I stayed with them. That there was this. They had a kind of restroom. Their bathroom was like in the basement next to the, to all the animals that were in their house. And I remember I was always scared of going down to the basement, and I could see the cows, through the through the wooden walls in a way, and they were like, like eating, and there was something raw in that in their homes, but there was also that smell. There was in a way wooden, the fire. They were taking their bath in the kitchen. They had to make hot water on the stove, and a little bit like in a Western. Yeah. And so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the instruments. And I said, I think the harmonium is actually, that was in all these old homes there. So I was thinking that might be a good instrument. And my great-grandmother actually had a leftover harmonium that I, over corners, was getting into my studio at some point, and I restored it, and it was 440 tuned. And it was just sitting there, and I said, this might be the right instrument. And so I went back home. I recorded on the next day, I recorded these 3 notes through a distortion and through like a lot of like plugins to make it like physically, heavy. All the noises that you hear, like the crackling, are
Sounds like a rocking chair.
Yeah, it's actually the microphones inside of the harmonium that records the pedals, and the pedals were just, cracking because of the wood. So there's a mechanical noise in there, and then I recorded these high, these sounds on top of that. And when I was finished with it, I was like, I have to send that Edward only this, and make sure if he likes it, that's the theme, and which also is quite dangerous, because you send something out and somebody says, "Oh no, that sucks."
You have this eureka moment, and then they go,
no, and then you actually, I said that yesterday in the Q&A. You have then a moment where you just maybe switch into service mode, and you just say like, I think I'm not hitting your idea, so let's see what the temp does, or something like that, you know. So I sent that out, and I didn't hear from Edward for like the whole day, and then there was the night, and there was the night, and the next morning, and then he called me and he said, we are sitting here, me and my wife, and we just listened to that track. This sounds like Led Zeppelin. It's awesome. It rocks, and it has all the, the balls, and like it is like physically, heavy, and it is really, it's exactly what we want. And so, I mean, after that, you are cut loose. You can work with this 3-note motive. And in a way, what I tried then, and that helps me now with, also with a Conclave score, but with all the other scores, I learned in that case that I can actually, with 3 notes, I can develop a lot of different themes and actually create a longer stretch, like nearly a symphonic piece, if I want to use that motive as something that, starts moving onwards. And I love that so much that I, in a way, started to put that motive in every cue, kind of sometimes just sneaking in the bass, or there's a violin piece when the main protagonist dies. It's a very fragile violin piece. Mm-hmm. It only exists of this 3-note movement, and moving onwards, obviously in a different direction. But yeah, so
and those mechanical sounds you could have tried to filter out.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to keep those?
Because I was a big fan of electronic music. And in all the electronic music, you have clicks and cuts, and you use actually sounds, mistakes. You cut them and you put them on grid. Field recordings are one recordings that I really love, where you have maybe sounds from tractors, or, like real sounds. It's a little bit like the music theory of John Cage, that, he always said that sound is music as well, and that you can sit on a street corner and just close your eyes and you hear syncopated car wheels doing rhythms, and I think once you get that knowledge, you should, all of the listeners should just stop at some of their favorite crossing, close their eyes, and just listen to all the sounds. And maybe there's a moment where you feel like this could be composed. Mm-hmm.
Because there's something very organic and musical about the cadence of it all.
Yeah, and also like, obviously sometimes it changes, but you can also write compositions. There are compositions for 3 orchestras where you stand in the middle and the orchestras are slowly moving towards you. And at some point you are in the center, where they, a little bit like an analog DJ set, where you mix records into each other. And that's why I didn't filter the noise out, because I loved the machine in it.
And you sent that cue to Edward the day after you saw the film?
Yeah.
So that's pretty rare.
It is.
And brave.
Yeah.
Moving to Conclave.
Yeah.
Did you feel a little more brave to do that again? Like how long did it take you to sort of noodle around and find your way with Conclave.
Because obviously, very different film.
Yeah.
It's a political thriller in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it is.
And it's in small spaces. It feels the small hallways. It's dark. It's, All Quiet was in a big open fields.
Yeah.
It's a completely different landscape visually.
So where'd you start?
Well, you have to, I think I'm old enough to detach myself from the habits that I had before, even though obviously you want to try to maybe work in the same way in the first place. So you want to maybe find something special. And Edward always says to me, and in a way that's an unwritten rule in a way now between the two of us, that when we start something, we want to find something new. So and also maybe something that we haven't done before, which puts somehow pressure on you. But at the same time, that's why I'm on Earth. I'm not here to administer my score writing in a way that I'm just starting. Let's take the sample out. This is my library. Let's do that again. It's a little bit. It's nice that there's somebody in a positive way encourages you to move onwards. And so I started that time with, looking for an instrument that reflects the religious idealism in the film, and which is for me a little bit something that I knew from my childhood, where when you go in a room, let's say you go in a church in Europe, in a big cathedral, and you just walk in and there is an organ player playing, and tourists are walking around. Even that, you walk in and suddenly it does like this. The breath is going through this room, and you're like, oh, like 500, 800 years ago, people were sitting here still already and doing the same thing. That is a kind of very idealistic idea of, or presents a little bit an idealistic idea of religion. At the same time, we know that it's not idealistic. It's something where you want to move to, or that you see as something that you want to reach. And to find a piece of music that reflects that kind of sound.
The duality.
Yeah, the duality, but also the eeriness and, like what an organ or a choir does, which we know can do the job very easily. I was looking for an instrument that in a way does the same thing, but is new, or for me, new. And so I found an instrument called the crystal bachet, which is an instrument that was... There we hear it, like the da-dee-da-da. That's the one. That in a way is an instrument that was built in 1952 by two brothers near Paris, by the Bachet brothers. And it's an instrument that is played with glass rods, and it has like metal cylinders. So it's a complete analog instrument, but it sounds like a synthesizer.
Yeah, it does.
And not like a glass harp. A glass harp is much more classy. But this one has, at the end, always these kind of weird, distorted resonances. There you hear now that same theme that the glass harp was, the crystal bachet was playing with the strings. So they repeat that, like, da-da-da-da. That's in a way the leitmotif of the whole film. And underneath it starts broiling,
Tension building.
And it's like ramping up to a moment, where a hit comes in. And the good thing is that Edward cuts in a way that those hits are not, have no reason. These hits are actually on a picture cut where you just feel like, you get tension in your body physically.
Yeah,
and then you get
if you listen to the score by itself, it almost sounds like a horror score.
Yeah. But at the same time, it has also classical elements where you feel like there's some not ancient, I wouldn't say ancient knowledge, but I describe it maybe like the religious idealism.
Yeah.
There's something in there that you feel like it, still warm. You feel like hugged by. Well, actually, I feel hugged. I don't know if that is for others the case, but I always, when I listen to it now, I think it's expressing quite good what I feel when I'm making music by myself. The score is exactly like that, and you can't achieve that with every score. Some scores are, you work on a film where you feel like this needs actually something that I maybe that I'm not attached to emotionally so much, but technically I can do this. And I'm, you know, and then sometimes you reach other levels of interest and you open up your you know, your ability.
I'm curious because All Quiet, your approach in some ways, this is reductive a little bit, but the music is being used to, I think you said maybe at one point, attack the film, attack the image. And in this case, you are building something. You're building kind of the majesty of the old tradition in the score, but there's also this unfamiliar, this element of kind of surprise and tension, and mystery, and we don't know what can happen next. So it feels almost like that's a more constructive approach in that it's actually building kind of a new thread through the storyline. What did your work with Edward kind of inform you as to where the music should guide the viewer or maybe supplement what is being seen on the screen?
Well, Edward is in himself already very precise in knowing where he wants to have music, you know. And so a lot of times when I get the film, I get kind of space holders, and I wouldn't say that is temp, because it's sometimes just not, you know, making any moves towards making the film better. It's much more for here. This is, you know, this is an area where I think music could work. And in the process of delivering cues and feeling like he likes what I'm doing, you can feel that suddenly music is going to different places in the film. And the interesting part is that he is in a way supporting me a lot to, you know, moving onwards. And when he likes something, he's saying, I really like that element. Please continue with this. And there was
explore a little further.
Explore further, go extreme, go no more extreme. The other thing is that we have obviously a ritual going in that film, and I felt like it needs also a kind of rudimental element that helps the rituals to, you know, to feel that there's a procedure going, and you have to somehow describe the procedure, but at the same time it would be nice that the music can help, you know, to push in certain areas or to create tension in certain areas where we don't know what that tension means in that scene. And for example, there's one scene where Ralph Fiennes is standing in this big hall and the shutters are closing before they shut the you know, the conclave. And that moment in a way describes now we're, you know, we're in it.
Yep.
And we are hidden.
Isolated.
Yeah, we're isolated. And we always felt like this is a moment where it could have like some 70s thriller music where you have all the like so high strings that are doing like the you know, like, and maybe some rumbling drums underneath, and maybe even I had at some moments which I still there are a couple of low piano octaves in the score. In the beginning I had even more like you know, like licks that were a little bit like a jazz kind of lick that is only in the low octave, that creates this, you know, something is going on. People are getting closer to something bad is happening, you know, which I really loved in these older, you know, 70s films where you had obviously synthesizers, but you didn't have a computer to, you know, to make like 32 triplets, on, right, you know, in a tempo of 130 or something like that, you know. So you either had to play it or you just said, "Now let's get a little bit, let's
do something else."
Yeah, let's do something else.
Well, one thing that I noticed about the film is you have a big orchestral piece in the credits, but none of that happened in the film itself.
Yeah.
Was that something for you? Was that
No.
what was the discussion about why that piece is in the credits and you didn't hear a little bit more of that kind of big moment in the film?
Because there was no, I felt the film in itself was not asking for a big orchestral film. There's one moment where I started with, right in the first round of cues, that was the scene with a lot of umbrellas moving on the screen from the top shot, which is one of the most beautiful
shot.
Amazing.
shot. And that, when I saw that, because it's so wide, it felt like, how can I actually, work with music on that shot? But at the same time, I had the feeling everything that is too, like has too much volume or too much instruments would feel maybe a little bit, it takes away the grace of the picture. So it needed something that is full, but also a little bit like holding back. That was one thing. The film had not many places where, you could actually go on a very, very big scope. At the same time, Edward was always saying, when the end comes and the light comes in, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but when you have the feeling, suddenly hope appears, that he wants to have the summer coming into the music. And that was actually when the black, we cut to black, and then I have to go to the summer, and here we go, and then we said, why don't we just compose something for the whole credits, which is 6 minutes and 50 seconds, which is the longest piece in the whole score. But it actually lets you sit and you hear it, and if you like it, you're like, okay, there's a message in the music that pushes you not out of the cinema. It just lets you sit for a while, reflect.
Yeah, it's another one of those storytelling things. We talked with Benjamin Wallfish about just the opening titles, and if you can get something over the, in his case, the Warner Brothers logo or whatever, but start to build a little bit of your musical sound there, you have more momentum when the story starts. And in this case, it's the opposite side of that. We've been on this journey, and you're left in credits and a moment of reflection.
Mm-hmm. It almost gives you an opportunity to use your own imagination about what's happening now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
an extension of the story.
Absolutely, and it's also something where you normally stop working. I mean, normally you end with the last cue,
a suite of whatever from the film,
or the suite is actually produced by an assistant or by the music editor with all the cue stems. But I think it's sometimes worth to keep an eye on that part of the film when there is no song, which is also a different thing, because when a lot of films have a big song there, and then to go back to the score is always a little bit. It's okay, but it's in a way a filler for me, like a music filler. Mm-hmm. But if you can continue the story with your own, and I'm a big fan as well, which we had in All Quiet, we had afterwards a piece that was on my record, on the Philanthropy record, that is on All Quiet, the end credit piece, and that is very sparse and reflective, and you just sit in the cinema because you can't really, you're struck by everything you've seen. So in a way, this moment after the film is finished is, I think, a very important moment.
Yeah, I
agree. I'm sure it was fun for you to have a blank canvas. I mean, you're not writing to picture in that case.
No, obviously these end credit pieces are for a lot of composers the grail of, here I can go, I can show what I can do, but it was in that case much more the question if, and the theme that is played in that orchestral piece is actually the same theme that the Crystal Bachet is playing. It's just a kind of version of that. And I, in a way, wanted to find also connection to the film still, so that it's not a complete new piece. So it was the best of all worlds, I would say.
Well, your speech, you better start writing it in your sleep, because it's definitely getting some buzz on the score.
Well, now I'm back with the same situation with Edward. You have to, in a way, not repeat yourself, mm-hmm. which I'm honestly, what I'm doing now is I'm happy if it gets acknowledged, and I'm trying to keep calm. And expecting anything to happen and not being, depressed or when it's not happening. It's you always have to work with the other side of it not in a that's a disaster way. It's more like, okay, well, next time. And you can do that obviously much better when you have already won a prize.
Yeah, I was going to say the first one is the big one, and now
that's the scary one.
It's an honor to be nominated.
Yeah, right? It's the second album, which is always difficult.
Yeah. Before we let you go, Dune Prophecy. We understand you recorded that in Vienna at Synchron Stage.
Yeah.
Very cool. Tell us a little bit about your approach musically to that. It's obviously a branch off of an existing huge universe. What went into that musically for you?
Well, it was I was already starting when the series was when they were shooting, because they needed some instruments and themes for the shoot. One was actually the choir that was sung by the Sisterhood, which is also a part of the main title theme, which is like the which I started. Yeah, there it is. So this vocal theme is a part of a ritual, and I had a wonderful singer, Josephine Stevenson, who was in the studio, and we tried a lot of things out where she was singing that line, but also she did a lot of like growling, like breathing noise, and like like weird, like weird sounds that are very like an animal, like a wolf, or like a hunting animal in a way.
Not what singers are usually known for.
Exactly. Yeah. No, and specifically like women that are singing normally the highest soprano that you can get. She was really, it was so nice to see her doing all these backwards kind of growling sounds, and recorded everything and made this choir piece. For the ritual, we gave them different stems because they had to record, let's say, certain elements with that part of the choir, other elements with that part, and somehow this choir was sticking always in. Whenever I received the cut, I saw them putting the choir on the title. I saw them, using the choir in other areas. Then I saw the first trailer and the choir was in. So I felt, okay, there's one theme that is, that you can use. And then I had another, I had to do some for like a kind of fire ritual for the Atreides. And so I had to work on that, and I was stumbling across, because they asked me, what would you suggest, what they play? And I said, there is an instrument that I found that is a medieval instrument called the racket. And it's it looks like a wooden vase, I watched these videos, and I can highly recommend that, of the BBC, I think from 1950, where guys with like beards, and they look like people that are going to an office, with like little briefcases out of leather, like standing there, and then one guy says, "Yeah, this is the record. It has certain octaves, and it plays very well." So, and then they start playing this piece, and the sound is like, the bass sound of that record is like nearly like a war horn. It is like really bassy and raw. And so I sent that image, and I saw somebody was doing like a record in a 3D printer. So I sent them these images of this instrument. I said, maybe that's an instrument that looks a little bit abstract and obscure, but it does this kind of very raw, war sound in a way. And they can just play it, they can hold it like, it has the size of 50 centimeters, maybe a little smaller. And they were totally amazed by by that instrument. And so I worked with that instrument a couple of times in the cues. And that's where I started in a way already researching, sounds and possibilities, and finding the sound source for the whole series. And when you have a starting point, it's
off to the races.
Yes, you are just getting into a kind of trance with writing.
I can see the joy in your face when you're talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you really love finding something new, trying something different. I mean, just in your whole path. It seems like that's kind of the thread of your.
Well, the cool thing is when it works, because I'm sure we're only seeing the things that work. There are plenty of times I'm sure you've tried something and thought, oh man, I can never let anyone hear this.
Yeah, I mean, I also buy sometimes instruments, which I have already ordered instruments now that need to be built in for 2 years. So I will get them in 2027. But I know that when they come, they will come to my studio, and I'm like, yes, now there's
someone make a cool movie. Start now,
yes,
and you'll get to use that.
In a few years, he's going to be the master at that. Yeah.
I think before we wrap up, you want to just do some 3 things.
3 things. These can be a quicker answer, but I'm just curious. Something that you learned going from a recording career into film, how that shifted some of your approach.
You mean for the approach in film, or?
Yeah, yeah, because you can't just be yourself, obviously. There is some other factor vision, I guess, the picture, that has to be factored in. But what did that kind of change about, I don't know, your workflow or even maybe your music sentimentality?
Well, I think it's informing both worlds at the same time. I mean, it's not like that I'm a performing artist and then now I'm going into film and I forget about the performing arts. I rather see that as a kind of, both worlds have very big challenges. At the same time, they are, the freedom of doing an own album without any influence obviously helps to be satisfied when you're working on something that is not yours. At the same time, on working on something that is not yours, it helps you to grow as a solo artist because you learn suddenly about yourself. Or about recording, you learn about orchestras, you learn about instruments. And that informs, again, your solo artist career, because you feel like next time I work for my solo record, I work with those instrumentalists, or I'm using a record, or, So in a way, these worlds are helping each other very much. I can highly recommend if you are if you are a composer and you feel crampy because, you always get tortured by people sending you notes, get an own artist output for yourself, release a record, find an own identity, because the own identity helps you sometimes when, your own identity get lost in a project, and you are calm, and that's a normal. I would say the normal procedure of film work is that you can go from nearly all your identity up to this doesn't sound like my music, but I'm still finishing it.
Right? Yeah. You mentioned something that I think fits this already, but I was curious about if you can pinpoint any one pivotal life experience or moment in your life when things changed. And I think it might have been when you were very young and almost went into medicine, and then maybe almost business, and then and a lot of things changed there. But I'm curious, anything that you reflect on when you're creating now and you think, you know what, this period of my life was really meaningful.
Yeah, I would say when I left the band and I was starting to, I worked for a long time in a kind of music school for 10 years, actually, when my kids were growing up. And before that decision, I had quite a kind of collapse in terms of, mental collapse. I would say maybe today you would call that depression or, anxiety in a way. Or even kind of burnout. Maybe that's also a word for that. But I think I learned there that every new development in your life somehow needs a catharsis. It needs a kind of drastic change. You can't sometimes get out of your own skin and just by decision making, do something else. You need sometimes actually an eruption, which is not always easy to handle, and it's sometimes very hard to digest, and it causes pain. But at the same time, this is sometimes necessary to move onwards in a different direction. And I'm not creating that by myself. I'm not I'm not torturing myself. I rather feel like the knowledge about that means that I'm always trying to avoid that by searching myself. And I think, but these experiences are very important because then you understand when you get closer to a point like that, to navigate a little bit in a different place, you know? And I think that was very helpful for surviving, because you can't have 10 or 15 of eruptions in your life. I think you wouldn't maybe survive.
Right,
you know?
yeah. Last of those three things is a particular composer or musical influence that you look back on a lot and you feel has inspired, I guess, a lot of your approach.
Well, there are different composers and different, you know, electronic musicians, I would say, that are all delivered pieces to my approach in a way. I would say for film music, it was maybe three people. One was John Williams, and well, two people were John Williams and Ennio Morricone, because I was listening to their music when I was young. You know, when I was 12, and I went the first time in the cinema, I saw Indiana Jones, and you know, then later I saw Once Upon in the West, which was one of the pieces where I felt like I couldn't sleep after that. I came home and I was just listening to that choir, to the vocal piece in there, and it was like the most touching, beautiful piece. It was a little bit like my first experience with the piano. So, you know, these moments were coming back over time. And I would say later in the time, maybe it was the score of There Will Be Blood by Johnny Greenwood, where I had the feeling, you know, somebody who's, you know, mainly in an independent band was suddenly creating a score. And obviously, I later learned that he was quite well educated in composition, but I didn't know at that time. And I was very glad that somebody took that approach and just made such an amazing score, which also used a lot of different string techniques that I didn't heard before. I was always thinking strings are classical, but here I suddenly heard these kind of elements that were like pitch shifting, you know, where you had like weird detuning and things like that. And that was an eye-opener for me.
That's very cool. Well, Volker, we know you're super busy and you're back to back to back here in LA, so we can't thank you enough for stopping by. Big thanks to Nate Gold and Soundbite Studios for hosting us here for this episode of Score the Podcast. Best of luck with Conclave and
thank you.
All the awards season coming up. Yeah, the film's amazing, the score's amazing, and you can get it now on physical media too. We have a copy of the Conclave vinyl in here, which looks great.
Yeah.
Best of luck
Dune
with
Prophecy
everything
as well.
Yeah. And Dune Prophecy. Yeah, a lot going on.
Thank you.
He's not sleeping a lot these days.
Well, I'm sleeping enough.
Okay, that's all we need.
Yes.
Volker, thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
For more, including bonus footage from Inside Composer Studios, follow Score, the podcast, on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and X.
Hey, wait! Before you go, this season of Score the Podcast is presented by Vienna Symphonic Library, used by many of the composers featured right here on Score the Podcast.
If you're looking for high-quality, sample-based virtual instruments that elevate your craft as a composer or musician, or just unlock the creative potential of your music, Vienna Symphonic Library has the tools that you need all in one place with the Synchron Series.
Recorded on Stage A of the Vienna Synchron Stage, the Synchron Series features every orchestral instrument, pianos, choir, everything you need, while innovating to create an intuitive, fully customizable software suite that puts you in control of everything you create.
These are real instruments recorded and engineered by the same people recording scores of your favorite films and TV shows. Netflix's The Crown, Disney and Marvel shows, Amazon Prime's Rings of Power, and HBO's Dune Prophecy, among many more. And the strings are something really impressive. Synchron Duality Strings is a package where you get both the large ensemble on Stage A and the small ensemble in a smaller, drier Stage B, performing simultaneously, so you can blend to create your own unique sound. Our listeners are using it, our guests on the show are using it, and for a limited time, get 20% off Synchron Duality Strings with promo code SCOREVIENNA. That will expire, so check it out. The best of Vienna, the city of music at your fingertips.
The city of music.
The city of music.
We need to get out there. Listen after this message for a demo. We're going to play a mocked-up version of James Newton Howard's theme to Fantastic Beasts using VSL's sample libraries. It's amazing.
Or you can check them out yourself at vsl.co.at. Check out their sample player, free libraries, and demos that you can play around with right now.
And from all of us, thank you to the awesome team at Vienna Symphonic Library for supporting this season of Score the Podcast.